For 8 full years, I was the invisible force holding our corporate empire together, quietly burying the massive mistakes of powerful executives who thought they were untouchable. I never asked for fame or public praise, but I made sure I was completely indispensable. However, when I walked into the office on a rainy Tuesday morning, I immediately noticed my private weekly meeting with the chief executive had vanished from my schedule. Within hours, my master administrative access to the entire network was silently revoked, proving that the company was preparing to throw me away. I had spent my entire career anticipating the exact moment the corporate vipers would turn against me. Instead of panicking, I calmly packed my things and waited for the inevitable ambush to unfold. Sure enough, I was summoned into a glass conference room where the newly appointed vice president, an arrogant young man named Julian who had married into the founder family, sat alongside our nervous human resources director. They handed me a termination packet, claiming my strategic position had been eliminated during a routine structural overhaul. Julian smirked as he demanded that I sign the official exit papers, clearly expecting me to cry, beg, or cause a scene in front of the entire office. I did not say a word or shed a single tear. Instead, I pulled out a custom fountain pen, carefully signed the acknowledgement form, and casually walked out of the building. What Julian did not realize was that 3 years prior, I had built a legal verification framework into our security system that bound my unique signature pressure to an encrypted archive. Long ago, when the company was desperately navigating a chaotic corporate merger, I personally drafted the legal safety nets for executive contracts. Hidden deep inside those massive documents was a dormant clause designed to protect key strategists from unfair political purges. The contract explicitly stated that if I was ever retroactively terminated by an executive with family ties to leadership, it would instantly trigger an automatic buyout. That single move would transfer controlling interest of our massive corporate equity trust directly to me. While Julian was celebrating his quick victory, I drove straight to a private notary and verified the time-stamped termination documents. Every single condition required to activate the dormant clause had been satisfied the moment Julian signed my severance paperwork. He thought he was cleverly eliminating an expensive legacy employee, but in reality, he was blindly walking into a massive financial landmine I had buried years ago. I quietly scheduled the encrypted activation packet to deliver directly to the board of directors during their afternoon meeting. By Friday afternoon, I casually walked back into the corporate headquarters wearing my sharpest suit, completely ignoring the stunned looks from the security guards in the lobby. I pushed open the double doors of the executive boardroom just as Julian was presenting his new strategic vision to the entire board. The room went completely silent as I took my usual seat at the table. Julian laughed awkwardly, trying to dismiss my presence, but my eyes remained fixed on the clock on the wall. At exactly 1 o'clock, the lead attorney's tablet let out a sharp notification chime that cut through the quiet room. On the main projector screen behind Julian, the encrypted legal packet opened automatically, displaying the verified buyout clause in full detail. The entire board stared in absolute shock as the official documents confirmed that my sudden termination had triggered a mandatory transfer of power. Julian turned pale as the realization hit him that he had accidentally surrendered control of the company. The chief executive slammed his hands onto the table, furiously demanding that our legal team find a way to cancel the agreement immediately. The lead attorney carefully reviewed the digital signatures, the notarized timestamps, and the Delaware registry filings before slowly shaking his head in defeat. Every single loophole had been completely sealed years ago, making the contract absolute and legally binding. The board members began whispering frantically among themselves as they realized their absolute authority had completely vanished in a single second. Julian tried to argue that the clause was merely an outdated draft from the merger, but the attorney firmly shut him down. The email announcement Julian had sent out regarding my termination explicitly cited a family-led restructuring, which fulfilled every single requirement needed to execute the transfer. The board realized that the young man they promoted out of favoritism had just destroyed their entire empire. I sat quietly at the end of the table, enjoying the complete collapse of their arrogance. Sudden stream of automated alerts began buzzing on every single device across the boardroom table, signaling that the corporate server was re-indexing ownership rights. The finance portal officially updated its control index, confirming that 72% of the executive equity pool had been consolidated under my name. The chief executive looked at me with pure horror, finally understanding that I was no longer an employee who answered to his commands. I had officially become the majority stakeholder of the entire organization. The chief executive fell back into his leather chair, completely stripped of his usual confidence and power. Brandon tried to stammer an apology, but there was nothing left for him to say as the reality of his failure set in. The board chair slowly turned toward me and asked if I intended to take an active role in managing the company moving forward. I simply offered a subtle smile, letting the heavy silence in the room serve as my final answer. Before leaving the room, I took my old employee badge out of my purse and gently slid it across the glass table toward Julian. I looked him dead in the eye and softly thanked him for firing me, reminding him that I could never have activated the clause on my own. As I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, the corporate monitors behind me locked into a final confirmation screen. I had entered that building as a discarded employee, but I walked out owning everything they built.